Get all my cords tangled up. I'm gonna wind up on my nose one of these days. How's everybody doing today? We got one good. Everybody else is sluggish. We're going to deal with sluggish this morning, or sometime or another. On our prayer list, we have at St. Thomas Midtown is Jennifer Flatt. ICU at Vanderbilt, Emmy Sales Petite. At home, Marie Martin, Bill Cole, and James Smith. And come Wednesday, Brother Tim Mitchell's going to have his hitchhikers removed. That's his pet name for his kidney stones. Whew. I dread that for you, son. Are there any others we need to add to our prayer list? Emmy Sales Petite. Apparently she needs a lot of prayers. She's in the ICU down at Vanderbilt, and she's in a lot of pain as they try to help her out. Dread that for. Okay, we're in the book of James. Today we continue with chapter 2. Beginning with verse 14. We'll go over verse 14 again. There's two different kinds of works that are under consideration. There's more than just two kinds of works in the Bible. But between Paul and James, there's only two types of works. Paul, his works excluded from God's plan to save. In other words, Paul is arguing that we're saved by faith and not by works of merit. That's his intent. James, on the other hand, he's got just the opposite problem with the folks he's speaking to. He's talking about works which are included in faith. If you have faith, there's going to be works, because works are the outgrowth of faith. So, and this is, I think, this is one of the most needed lessons that we must deal with as we talk to our friends and our relatives, people we work with, so on and so forth. Because there's a terrible division between the truth and the idea that works have no place in God's plan of salvation, or works have nothing to do with our being saved. The popular mantra of the denominational world is you are saved by faith alone. It has works has nothing to do with it. Well, to be perfectly honest about it, you are saved by grace, not faith. You are saved by grace because of your faith. God extends his grace on you if you believe him and trust him. Well, what does it mean to believe and trust him? If you believe him, naturally you're going to do what he wants you to do. That's the outgrowth of faith. When you believe something, you act accordingly. If you believed I was giving away $100 bills up here, you probably get up and come up here and get one. But if you thought I was just kidding, you probably stay in your seat. What causes you to get up and come up here to collect a $100 bill? You believe I have a $100 bill up here. Your belief in me prompts you to come up here to retrieve the money. But if you think I'm untruthful, you have no reason to do it. Well, I know that's an oversimplification, but it's basically what James is talking about. If you believe in God, you're naturally going to respond to the things that God wants you to do. That's what belief does. And that's how he's going to argue his point. This is something that most of your friends don't understand. It may seem simple to you. I guarantee you it's not simple to them. It's very hard. It's very complicated. They believe in the doctrine of salvation by faith only, and unless you're capable of teaching them in a very clear way, you'll not have a chance of converting them to the truth of God. Excluded are works in which one might glory. That's what Paul's talking about in the Ephesian letter. Works by which you can boast, like the Jews did. They had circumcision, for example. They were the descendants of Abraham. And they boasted in that. They boasted in the fact that they were children of Abraham, that they were circumcised on the 8th day according to the law as Moses prescribed. They believed and taught that a circumcised Jew was ultimately going to be saved in the day of judgment because they had complied with the works of the law. Okay, now Paul, he's arguing against that. You're not saved because you've been circumcised. You're not saved because you're the seed of Abraham. You're saved because you believe God. Now, Paul's not denying the fact that the outgrowth of works from faith. He's just not even talking about it because it has nothing to do with what he's talking about. He's just talking about the fact that there's no way you can earn your own salvation. James, on the other hand, includes works as a manner of perfecting faith, making faith all it can be. I believe God, therefore I do what he has me to do. As I do what the Lord wants me to do, I see the truthfulness of what he said, and my faith gets stronger. We exercise our spiritual muscles by doing the things that God would have us to do. We grow in faith by doing the things that God would have us to do. Boy, I tell you what. So it's two different kinds of works. I wish I could explain it better. Paul's works, meritorious works, works of human achievement, works by which you earn salvation. You can boast in the presence of God. You could get into heaven and say, look what I did, God. I saved myself. Included in the works that James talking about, these are the commandments of the Lord, wherein obedience is essential to salvation. Why does God want us to give on the first day of the week? Why does God want us to eat the Lord's Supper on the first day? Why does he want us to pray? Why does he want us to turn the other cheek? Why does he want us to help our neighbor when our neighbor needs our help? Why does God want us to do all these things? God has given us the commandments he has given us as a way of building us up spiritually. By doing the things that God wants us to do, we can perfect our faith. We can become more like God in the process. Otherwise, you raise the question. You have faith in God. Well, how do you perfect your faith? There's nobody on the planet that knows how to perfect faith. None of us do. The only person that knows how to do it is the Lord, and the Lord does it through his commands. By doing the things he wants us to do, our faith grows stronger and stronger and stronger until ultimately we feel like we're going to explode because it gets so big. In Hebrews 5 and 9, we're told that Jesus became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. The author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. That's simple to understand. You may not understand the advantage of doing the things that God would have us to do, but it doesn't matter. If you believe in God, you're going to do it for the simple reason that God told you to do it. That's all that matters. Some of you have heard this before. I remember being told back a long time ago, B.R.'s grandfather, for example, he used to preach a little, and he didn't understand eating the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week, and the reason had to do with Acts chapter 20, verse 7. On the first day of the week, the disciples came together to break bread. Breaking bread had to do with the Lord's Supper. Well, when the disciples came together to break bread, while the church was gathered there, the Apostle Paul started preaching. He started preaching, it was sometime after 6 p.m. It'd be Saturday night. According to the Jewish clock, 6 p.m. Saturday night became their Sunday, their first day of the week. So they would meet after 6 p.m. sometime, and they would worship God. Well, they came together to break bread, and while they were all there, and Paul was there, Paul started preaching to them. And he preached until midnight. Well, at midnight, there was this boy, a young man, by the name of Eutychus. He'd been sitting in a window in the upper chamber where they were, and he fell asleep, and he fell out of the window. Oh boy, everybody was in an uproar. They ran downstairs. The Apostle Paul, he got over him, and he said, "Fear not," and Paul raised him back up. And then when they got done, they went back up to the upper room, and then we're told that Paul finished his teaching, and they got together and they broke bread. Well, according to his reckoning, which was common for that time, according to his reckoning of time, they came together on the first day of the week to eat the Lord's Supper. Paul preached to midnight. Eutychus fell out of the window at midnight. That carries over now into Monday. And after they went back upstairs, they broke bread, which means they ate the Lord's Supper on Monday. And me and him was talking about that. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Why do you eat the Lord's Supper on Sunday if the disciples ate it on Monday, according to his thinking? And here's what he said: that's what they aim to do. I thought that was a great answer. That's what they aim to eat it on the first day of the week. They didn't get to because something came up and everything went wild for a moment there. But they aimed to eat it on Sunday, therefore he concluded, and as did all other people, well, I shouldn't say all other people, a lot of people, they concluded that since they aimed to eat on the first day of the week, they ought to eat it on the first day of the week. I read the same argument by Alexander Campbell. He later changed his mind, but when I first read his argument on it, he had the same conclusion. they ate the Lord's Supper on Monday, but they aimed to eat it on Sunday. So that's what they followed, what they had aimed to do. Now that's faith. That's great faith, in my opinion. They misunderstood the text, but it didn't matter. They intended to eat the supper, Lord's Supper, on Sunday, so that's what they did. They went by what God said, not necessarily by what the disciples did. Now, the reason that they misunderstood was because of the time difference between the Jewish clock and our clock. Their day began, like I said, their day began at sundown. Our day, of course, begins, generally our daylight begins in the a.m., 6 a.m. So we think of when you come together on the first day of the week, it's sometime after 6 a.m. That's generally what we think. If somebody wanted to come together, the church wanted to meet at 5 a.m., that'd be fine with us. We don't care. That's in accordance with what the scriptures teach, because anytime after midnight is Sunday, or the first day of the week, according to our way of reckoning time. So when we start thinking about what we're reading from our understanding of the clock, we get confused at what was really taking place. If Paul preached to midnight on Saturday night, which was, of course, Sunday, Eutychus fell out of the window. They came back up to the upper chamber. They ate the Lord's Supper, which was still on the first day of the week. Maybe, let's say it was 2 a.m., and they ate the Lord's Supper. That would have still been 2 a.m. Or, figure it this way. Suppose the text says the disciples came together on the first day of the week to eat the Lord's Supper. Okay, here's another way you might look at it. The disciples came together, they came into the building to eat the Lord's Supper, and that's what they did. They ate the Lord's Supper. And after they ate the Lord's Supper, the Apostle Paul started preaching. And he preached until midnight. Now you can figure it with our clock, and it'll still work. Sometime after 6 p.m., let's say, Sunday evening, the church comes together, break bread, eat the Lord's Supper, and that's what they do. The first thing they do in their service is eat the Lord's Supper. After that, Paul stood up to preach. He preached till midnight. Eutychus fell out of the window. He went down there. He raised him back up. Paul preached until morning, and then they broke bread. Well, what would they be doing breaking bread? Well, we call it breakfast. They'd been up all night. They were fixing to disperse and go their own ways. So before they did, they had a fellowship meal. That's a perfectly logical and plausible explanation. I can come up with at least 2 explanations for what happened, which means they ate the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week. They aimed to eat the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week, and that's what they did. They did eat it on the first day of the week. But what's fascinating to me is the fact that they thought they ate the Lord's Supper on Monday, but the Lord intended for them to eat it on the first day of the week. That's what they aimed to do, and that's what they were going to do, and they did. I thought it was, to me, an incredible amount of faith. I know I didn't have that kind of faith at the time, but they were going to do what God wanted done no matter what. Any questions? Faith is a fascinating subject, very deep subject, very fascinating though. The alleged contradiction stems from the incorrect doctrine that salvation is by faith alone. This is the whole problem. Look at the Methodist discipline, what it says. The doctrine of faith and faith only is a most wholesome doctrine and very full of comfort. That comes out of the discipline, Article 9. The doctrine of faith and faith only is a most wholesome doctrine and very full of comfort. I've used this discipline in my discussions with Methodists through the years, and there are several things in their little creed that I reference, but this is one of them. And I've never ran into a preacher who didn't agree with this, that the teaching of faith only is the most wholesome doctrine, that it's true. It's what God would have us to do. And it's pretty much standard through all the denominations that faith only is what the Lord is looking for. It doesn't really matter what you do as long as you believe in what you're doing. You believe it's good. It's a good thing to do. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, or if, I shouldn't say right or wrong. It doesn't matter if it's something God ordered or not. If you believe it's a good thing to do, then that's what you ought to do. There was one fella, he defended clown ministry, and that's how he defended it, by the number of people they could bring into the church by having a little circus, well, clowns perform in the service rather. There was another one. They had a wrestling, just up in Cookville. They had a wrestling match during service, and people came in. They wanted to watch the wrestlers. I guess it was a pretty good wrestling match. That was back when these guys used to come around to town pretty regular back in. But they brought them into town. They had a wrestling match, and they had a lot of people in the house that day. It did bring a lot of people into the service. And there were things like this being done for the purpose of bringing people into the church house. Well, it did work as far as multiplying the number, and everybody felt good. But in the final analysis, what did it accomplish? You take the Lord's money and you spend it. And he talks about us being wise stewards in the scriptures. We're supposed to, we get 10 talents and we're supposed to make a profit on those 10 talents. We're not supposed to come in the hole. The man that had 10 returned 10 plus 10. The 5 plus 5. The 1, of course, he hid it. And that's all he had to give the Lord when he came to collect. We're supposed to be wise stewards. How we use God's money, and it is God's money. When we turn loose of it on Sunday, it's not ours anymore. Now it belongs to God. Now, I hope you understand that. I've been reamed out real good with people telling me that's our money. That is not our money. That money belongs to the Lord. And whenever we use it, we try to use it in a way that the Lord approves of. Okay, we bring in the clown ministry. Does the Lord approve of our spending his money for a clown ministry to which there's no profit? What about big band, orchestras, and the like? You know, some of these orchestras in some of these really big churches, I read about one that it cost $500,000 on Sunday morning to operate the orchestra and everything that went with it. The sound people, the engineers, all this stuff that went with it. And then, of course, paying the people who played music and even those who were singing. A lot of the people who sing, they don't belong to the church there. A lot of them are just singers, and they hire them to come in and sing Amazing Grace or whatever during the service. And sometimes the very largest churches, they can spend up to $500,000 on Sunday morning to entertain the crowd. Jesus said, I have nowhere to lay my head. I wonder how he'd feel about us spending his money on such an event, to which there really is no value. We have to be good stewards. It takes more than just faith. Well, I should say, all it takes is the faith that the Bible speaks of. That's true. But when people talk about faith only, they're not talking about that kind of faith. They're talking about belief. Belief that God exists, belief that Jesus is the Son of God. If you have that kind of a belief, that's all you need to have. The rest of it will take care of itself. And it's I've had to argue that all my life, and it's like trying to pull the elephant out of a hole. You just don't get anywhere. I didn't. Once in a while I'd help somebody see, but most of the time I'd come out empty. What does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works to go with it? Profit. Can faith save him? There's two questions that are being raised. First of all, what profit is there for a man who claims to have faith but does not have works? The word profit here means advantage, blessing, good, etc. What is there to be gained from a man who claims to have faith but has not works to go with it? Secondly, can that faith save him? Now, notice the word that there. In the original text, the Greek text, the word that is in this place. I did a real quick search this morning, and there was only, actually, out of all my translations, I think I went through about somewhere between 15 and 20. Out of all those translations, there was one that didn't have the word that inserted there, and that's the King James Version. The King James has, can faith save him? Every other translation, including the NIV, 2021, it had that inserted in there. And it's an important little word. If someone says he has faith but does not have works, can that faith, the faith under consideration, faith without works, can that faith save him? Now that's James's question. He's talking about a type of faith, a kind of faith. Here it's a faith with no works. And James is asking, can that faith save him? Then he proceeds. He doesn't minimize the doctrine of faith. It's taught. James understood it was taught through and through. Everyone knows the subject of faith is of the utmost importance. But salvation by faith only is never taught. Never. Nada. Not once in all the scriptures. Faith frequently stands for the entire Christian system when the article appears, the faith. Jude, contend earnestly for the faith, which was once and for all delivered to the saints. Contend earnestly for the Christian system is what he means by that. It's got the article, though. And whenever the article appears, that's generally what the author is talking about. But when the word faith appears by itself, uh, most of the time, it has to do with the Christian system, such as Galatians 3:23 through 29 said. Man, James is developing an argument, I believe. And in his head, the argument goes something like this. A man says, I have faith, but not works. Well, James asked the question, can that faith save him? Faith without works? That faith cannot save him, James will prove. That faith has no works of faith. And without works of faith, it's not really faith at all. There has to be works before it could be called faith, at least according to the Bible definition, the way God defines works or faith. Faith without works is profitless, it is barren, it is vain, it is dead. James makes that point in verse 17, 20, and 26. He's driving the nail in big time. This is why Martin Luther didn't like the book of James. This is why so many people today don't like the book of James. When you get to James chapter 2, verses 14 through 26, if you want to defend the doctrine of salvation by faith only, you're going to lose the battle because you ain't got a leg to stand on. I mean, James knocked that ball out of the park a long time ago. Well, what does that mean? That means people are worshiping God in vain. Well, what does that mean? That means bad things. It's the kind of things we hate to think about. That's why it's important to understand so we can talk to other people and hopefully help them understand. Sometimes they will, especially the people you're most interested in, like the people you love very much. They usually tend to think about what you said even after you said it. They might get mad and tell you to hush, but after they tell you to hush, they're still thinking about it. My mama was that way. I don't know how many times she made me hush, but then after I hushed, she kept thinking about it until she finally taught herself the truth. Can that faith save him is the way the text ought to read. Hebrews 11:4, 7 through 8, 17, verse 23. By faith, Abel offered. By faith, Noah prepared. By faith, Abraham offered. By faith, Moses was hidden. In every case in Hebrews chapter 11, which is sometimes called the honor roll of faith or the heroes of faith, it's there to demonstrate to us what faith does. In Hebrews 11, in every instance, when a person was credited with having faith that pleased God, they did something. The faith motivated them to do something. Noah believed what God said about a flood coming. That's why he built an ark. It appears he may have spent 100 years building that boat. I suppose it would have taken every dime he had. No telling how many people he had to hire, but it was because he believed that Noah built that boat, that ark. And because he believed and built the ark, he was able to save his family when the time came for the flood. If he hadn't have believed that God was going to send a flood on the earth, what do you suppose he would have done? You think he would have built that ark? I wouldn't. Not if I didn't believe. The only thing that caused me to invest 100 years of my life would be because I had a very strong faith in what God said. The gospel of common sense is what many people call the letter of James. It is common sense. It's easily read, but it's not as easy to understand. The royal law is what we're building on. James 2 and verse 8, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Previously, he who loves his neighbor as himself will show mercy to him whether he is poor or rich. Now, indifference to the needs of those around him is proof of his lack of saving faith. You can see if a person has faith or if they don't have faith. How can you tell? It's by what they do. You can tell. For example, if a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, depart, be in peace, depart in peace rather, be warmed and filled, but you do not give them the things which are needed for the body, what does it profit? Do you believe they need food and clothing? Absolutely. But you don't give them any food or clothing. What good is your faith? Well, it's not good for anything. It didn't do any good. It didn't help anybody. It was kind of useless. And then he concludes in verse 17. And so it is with faith. Faith by itself, if it does not have works, it's dead. It's dead because it's alone. What is death of the body? The separation of the spirit from the body, right? James 2:26. The body apart from the spirit is dead. The body is dead. Why? Because the spirit's no longer there. There's two things that have to be united in order to have life. That's the body and the spirit. Together you got life. Apart you've got death. Well, the same thing is true by faith. Faith accompanied by works of faith, you got a living faith. But faith apart from works, you have a dead faith. And that's the point that James is making. When we talk about a salvation by faith with no works that follow, you're talking about a dead faith, James says. And a dead faith isn't going to be helpful in that case. Verse 14 again, what does it profit, my brethren, if someone says he has faith but does not have works? Can faith save him? Verses 15 and 16 demonstrate there's no profit to faith without works, just like there's no profit to a person's belly being full because you believe they're empty, but you don't give them anything to eat. The hungry remain hungry. Thus also, verse 17, as there is no profit to faith without works regarding the hungry, there is no profit if faith does not have works. One is like the other. Without works, in either case, whether it has to do with feeding someone or whether it has to do with faith, if there are no works that accompany it, it's a dead faith. It's useless. It doesn't help. This is dead. Faith alone is unable to save the dead. Faith alone can't save the hungry. Faith alone can't save a dead faith either. Okay, verses 18 and 19. I don't know why I got that. James 2:20 through 22. But do you want to know, O foolish man, that faith without works is dead? Do you want to know? Was not Abraham our father justified by his works? I inserted the word his for a little clarification. Whenever I have something like that, you always know I've injected it in there. I forget to put my initials there most of the time. Was not Abraham our father justified by his works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar? Justified by his works when he offered Isaac his son on the altar. Do you see that his faith was working together with his works? And by his works, his faith was made perfect. Faith working together with works. I thought about a locomotive when I read that. I think about it going like that. Faith and works, faith and works, faith and works, faith and works. They work together. They work in harmony with one another. And because they are together, faith increases, it grows. perfected, made complete, made whole, entire. Faith becomes all it can be. Why? Because of the works. It's not merely because of the faith. Faith's a good thing. I believe in God. That's a good thing to do. But believing in God only, there's no value to it. He'll go on directly to prove the demons also believe. What good does it do them? The demons, you reckon they got more faith than we do? The demons were separated by God back in the beginning because there was apparently some type of a revolt against the authority of God led by Satan, the prince of the demons. They felt, did they see God during the creation time? They watched as God created the heavens and the earth. Were they able to see God? They were angels. All the angels were holy before God. Could they see God? I don't know. I'm inclined to think they could, but I really don't know for sure. But they were judged by God. They felt the wrath of God. They were cast away from God and into a place of torments. What kind of faith did the demons have? Strong faith? You reckon their faith would be stronger than our faith? They already faced God. They experienced his anger. You reckon their faith was stronger than our faith? I'm inclined to believe that they probably were. If their faith didn't do them any good, what good would our faith do us if ours is also a dead faith? We'll go on with this a little bit more, God willing, next week. I really want us to understand this very well because it is so important, especially with all these kids coming up.